The Wall Street Journal understands business, but it didn't always understand the business value of design. When Che Douglas, now Senior Vice President and Head of Design, came to the Journal, design was treated as a service organization and not a strategic pillar of a well-run business. We chat with Che about how he went about getting the right people involved to transform their design organization and spread design throughout the company, using tools like design sprints, and how he showed the value of design to the organization through a direct impact on their bottom line. Grab a copy of the Journal and sit down for our chat with Che. Thanks for listening.
Support for Design Better comes from Gusto, who make running a small business easy. Get 3 months free at gusto.com/designbetter once you run your first payroll. Running a small business is hard work, especially all of the payroll, quarterly tax filing stuff, and HR things. I'd rather be focused on my business and my customers than dealing with the administrative duties. But Gusto makes it easy. They automate the complicated parts of running a business. With Gusto, I never miss federal or state payroll tax filings, and I love the time off requests and time tracking tools. Gusto even offers a small group health insurance option for nearly any budget. When you run into issues you need help with, their HR experts are ready to help. It's a very well-designed product, easy to use, and great emotional design that will put a smile on your face. Design Better listeners get 3 months free once they run their first payroll. Just go to gusto.com/designbetter. That's gusto.com/designbetter. I've worked with lots of search firms, both as a leader searching for new talent for my teams, and as an individual exploring new steps in my career. But I trust none more than Wirt & Company. Since 1995, Wirt & Company has been the design community's most trusted search firm, co-founded by a designer and led by a CEO who has in-house operational startup experience. Wirt & Company is guided by the principle that creative leadership is essential to business success. They've helped some of the most admired brands from early-stage startup to Fortune 500 build world-class creative teams. We're talking about companies like Airbnb, the New York Times, the Four Seasons, Notion, Figma, Google, Cartier, and Fair. Not bad. If you're looking for a partner to help you find the right person for a critical role, look no further than Wirt & Company. And if you're looking for your next design leadership role, Wirt & Company will guide you through the process as a friend and a champion throughout your journey. They take the time to get to know you, to understand what you need professionally and personally. Whether you're looking for your next role or your next team member, Wirt & Company can help you find a meaningful relationship. Visit wirtco.com to learn more and get in touch. That's WERTCO.com.
Che Douglas is the SVP and Head of Design at the Wall Street Journal. He's helped transform the design team from a service organization to a strategic component of an embedded engineering, product, and design, EPD, structure. In 2018, the WSJ won a Webby Award for the Best News App. And let's jump right into our conversation with Che Douglas from the Wall Street Journal.
So, Che, you talked about using personas in your team to try to understand your customer base and design products that work really well for them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes personas don't quite work out because when you talk to real people, you discover that, personas are often about demographics, and we're just trying to understand behaviors. And sometimes those behaviors are hard to pinpoint. I'm curious if do you use other mechanisms like jobs to be done as a more stable way to understand your customer base?
Yeah, I think I might just give you a couple of examples rather than talk about the tools straight away, if that's okay. So I think to unpack it right now, if we look at our audience base, it's super diverse. Like our site is up to 300 million page views in a month. That's just WSJ.com. And so if you're thinking about trying to slice that out and break it up into segments, that's something that we've always wanted to do. And we work with another team within our organization called Customer Intelligence, and they look at a lot of our customer data to figure out how they might segment things into certain groups. And I think from that, we'd kind of, a couple of years ago, boiled things down into 6 personas, things like mobile mover to CEO, etc. And I think while that was useful at the start of kind of kickstarting ideas and things like that, what it wasn't really useful for was when we have these products that have been living and existing for a really long time, like our site that might be decades old. and with a huge audience base of very diverse needs. And I think what we talked about before we hit record, was CEO Council, which I was lucky enough to attend one of our conferences that we run and talk to some of the CEOs there, who we would definitely draw them up as a very specific persona and put it on the wall as a design team prior to me even going to that. And I think what that unlocked for me was that talking to a range of them at this conference about their habits and behaviors and how they used our products in their daily lives and other news platforms in their daily lives to make decisions was really interesting. Every one of them was very different, from one person who would only open their iPhone app if they received a notification from one of the news apps that they subscribed to other people that would start, towards the back of the print newspaper and read it backwards, or rip out sections and fold it and do different things with it. And some people would just consume our content through newsletters and then clicking through from newsletters. So all of these people that we would typically, as a design, product, engineering team, would look at from a persona level and kind of categorize them, had very different behaviors. So what I think one of the things that we shifted at that point, it was more a different mindset than even a framework or a tool, to thinking a lot more about habits and behaviors of people, and then using some of the design principles that we use and methods that we use to improve our products for them in different ways. And I think what's then interesting at the same time is then how you layer in things like accessibility, performance in terms of page load or performance in the app, in terms of speed, and into the designs and things that you're creating. And you're making them for different types of people at different times and different use cases. And so it was very much kind of flipping everything from personas, which again, what I was going to say is that I think they're really great for startups and smaller companies where you're building a brand and a consumer base and you need a clear idea of kind of who you're going to be designing for. It's a great reminder. But I think we actually need to do the opposite. We need to think about everyone, every single person on this planet, all of the time. And that might sound really overwhelming, but it's actually a really, really good way of looking at it, we've found, because I think you end up simplifying a lot of the things that you do, because digital products can be extremely complex, particularly in news, I guess, speaking from experience on that side. And I think that just allows you to actually make more rapid decisions rather than, it gives you more constraints than less, and that allows you to simplify the products. And I think a lot of what we're looking at now is that we often are just constantly adding features to products because it's things that people are asking for, or it's a great idea for the business strategy or the news strategy going forward. But we're actually thinking a lot about the idea of kind of design debt and experience rot, which other people have talked about in the industry recently too, and how you actually remove things to make the core of what you really offer, and the value of that, really come to the surface and be really, really obvious as well.
Yeah, let's talk more about the removal of things, because that's, I think designers get that inherently, like in their physical space of like living simply or being very particular about the things that they choose to surround themselves with.
Yeah.
But when it comes to product design, there's so many other factors and so many stakeholders, as you said, a lot of different personas who express these what seem like really critical needs. We have to have this. I need this for it to be successful. And so there's this, perceived strong business case to not take things away. We over-index on preservation over cutting things. So I'm curious how you deal with the controversial conversations inside the company and also outside the company of, hey, you moved my cheese, or you ate my cheese.
You ate it. Exactly. Yeah, so there's lots to unpack with that. I think it's what's really, really interesting is the different stakeholders and the different languages they speak. Not obviously different languages. I mean by like news speak, because we have a newsroom, and they talk a very different language to our marketing team or to other or the business side. So I think one is really like understanding where they're coming from, so that you can talk to them better. There is no utopia. Like, it's hard. You have to debate this stuff constantly. There's no, you can constantly spend all your time trying to refine processes and talk about the best way of doing things. But I think you really need a lot of messy conversations to build the trust that you need. And also like be really honest with not knowing a lot of the things that they're talking about, so you can learn about their worlds as much as they need to learn about yours. So I think the things that I've seen successful are where we've built really strong relationships, particularly in the newsroom, because everything that we do is built off our core product, which is content. That's our number one asset. All the value that we extract comes from that. So we're really building on top of that. And so the conversation then, if you can change it in that way and you can connect with the newsroom in the way that you talk about content and what it means to readers and consumers, our members, then they start kind of understanding that, and you can get to a point where you can say, well, that thing doesn't make sense really, does it? If that's the way they're using it and that's the feedback we're getting. And we've actually, we've made 3 options, 3 prototypes, and we've put that in front of people, and we've sent out some surveys and we've done some quantitative and qualitative research, and it's come back, and this one we can actually throw out. A lot of the time when you're validating things with people as well, you show them stuff, they like all of them. So then it comes back to the business and the newsroom. We have these 2 big stakeholders. I always talk about them like that, is the newsroom and the business side, which I think most companies just have the business. But the newsroom's just, obviously creating the content. So it's our core stakeholder, and that's, has to be our biggest friend and the one that we understand the best, to be able to kind of take that and turn it into something that makes sense in the real world for people. So as soon as you can kind of connect all those things together and you can talk about them in different ways and the ways that make sense to those different stakeholders, and it becomes easier. It's never easy. That's the thing. I don't think design, in the sense that we like to simplify and remove clutter and all of that kind of stuff, is ever easy, because so many people just go back to what they know, which is like deadlines and adding features, right? We all know that. And you can change a leader somewhere here or there, and all those things come back again. You have to go through it full circle.
So when we first spoke to you, you mentioned that you helped bring about a pretty big change in the design team, which was originally treated more like a service organization. So maybe we could back up a little bit, and you could tell us the story of what brought you to the Wall Street Journal, and then some of the challenges that you faced in making that transformation in the design team.
My journey really started with, I'm Australian, you can probably hear my accent, but I started in design. I studied communication design at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. And from there, I found it really hard to get a job out of university. I actually specialized in my final year in typography and photography. A lot of things that I felt were very foundational to the visual side of design, which I think is really the thing that we always look at as being the obvious thing that people speak to when they talk about design. But I think you do need to be able to be really knowledgeable in that kind of area of the craft as well, even if that's how we get kind of perceived by the general public. And so I did all of that. I eventually, after a year of kind of freelancing, really just being unemployed, I got a job at our Australian Football League. A friend of mine from university already had a job there, so he was lucky to invite me in. I ended up for 3 years working there, doing a lot of layout in the print publishing area. But I was much more interested in brand identities and designing logo types and identity systems at that time. And then the digital side of that, all the touch points that came out of on the digital side. So I helped win them some work, and I really enjoyed doing that side of it, which was kind of selling ideas and winning business. And from there, I decided to quit and start my own business, which was pretty crazy idea. Looking back, definitely a crazy idea. I had some help from my parents early on because they'd run their own business. That's a whole nother story, but just that kind of motivated me to think that it was an option that was available. Otherwise, I don't think I would have even thought about doing it. And definitely the struggle was real for the first few years. And then after about 4 or 5, was able to start picking and choosing clients a bit more. Not all the time, because I needed to feed all of my staff and keep the lights on. But we really focused on doing branding and digital work for anyone and everyone, as long as they were good people and their motives and interests was real and they were inquisitive about what we could help them with and what we could offer. We generally ended up working with them. And after about 4 or 5 years, I realized that there was a lot of upfront work that we could do and charge for before we actually did any tangible design work per se. And so we'd usually spend a week or 2 weeks, depending on how meaty the size of the business, number of stakeholders and stuff were. And we'd bring them into our studio and I guess you'd probably call it a design thinking workshop. Maybe we called them branding workshops at the time. And we'd just ask them a lot of big questions like, why are you here? What are you doing? What do you do? Who's your customer base? What are the big problems you're trying to solve? What are some potential unmet needs out in the marketplace that you can leverage based on your core capabilities and your strengths? And we'd do that from like a 1-person band right up to companies with 10,000 people. So in any industry, and we really enjoyed that, and it would give us a chance to reframe the work and the scope of work back to them. So I really enjoy that side of design as well. It's like this unexpected thing. They're like, why is a designer talking to me about business? And then why are they like telling me that I don't need brochures and a website, that I actually need a loyalty program and a app and a storefront redesign? I don't know. So, it was really interesting to be able to change that conversation and learn about a ton of different industries and different businesses at different life cycles. And I think that gave me really good grounding in running my own business, which I ran for 9 years before I moved over here. And the transition for me was a catalyst with my wife now was basically ready to leave Melbourne. She was a bit over it. We'd been there for a while and wanted to try a new city. And what ended up happening is a really close friend of mine who was at Google at the time got tapped on the shoulder for a really big job to be interim CTO at Dow Jones. Dow Jones, about 4,000 people. So it's a pretty serious job, about 200 to 300 software engineers to run all the technology for Dow Jones. He took the job. I then flew over not long after to help settle Emily into New York, and he started putting me in touch with people. The first couple of people was a guy called Himesh Patel and Edward Russell, who now run our innovation department for Dow Jones. And so when I came over, I met with them, spent a lot of time just learning about them and the business, and met some more people. And they made an offer, and I stayed an extra couple of weeks longer than I thought I would, just to kind of really explore it and entertain it. And the offer was basically working with them, Ed, who was the chief product officer, and Himesh was the creative director at the time, across Dow Jones, all the brands. And so I got to do that. And then not long after, they formed the innovation department, and I got offered to look after design with a move into the newsroom on the commercial side for the Wall Street Journal. And that was basically kind of when I moved into the newsroom officially and took over the reins. And that's 3.5 years ago now. And so that's the journey to that point. Since then, I think it's been a really interesting ride through not talking about the value of design, but I think showing it in different pockets, just trying to be a really good, strong internal, external voice for design and what it means. Be really patient with people to educate them on all the different ways that it can be really valuable to the newsroom and to the business. And, I formed some really great relationships and made some really great friends here as a result of being on my feet a lot of the time, honestly, talking to people. And I've also been really lucky to hire a ton of talented people and convince them to come and work for a really, big heralded institution like the Journal. And I think, it might seem strange, but like actually hiring people into a brand like Dow Jones and Wall Street Journal is hard, because you've got players like the New York Times and things where their design's kind of part of their DNA, The Guardian, etc. But then out of the media industry, you've got all these big tech companies, really just hiring all the best people. So I had to kind of really create a new network in New York and outside of America as well, and pull in some good folks to do that. So that's kind of where we are today.
Let's talk a little bit more about building relationships. You talked about, in running your business for 9 years, seeing companies in a lot of different stages. We've actually been doing a lot of research on this particular topic, seeing how design as a function matures inside of a company.
Yeah.
And we'd love to talk more about that transformation, that process, and the Wall Street Journal. One of the things that we found in our research is that developing the relationships between the different groups, the different factions. In your case, you've got business stakeholders, you've got the people in the newsroom who have strong perspective and on the stories that are being delivered. And, to use your framework you were talking about with your clients when you're running your business, changing the conversation of, you think you need brochures, but you actually need all of these things. How have you gone about building those relationships inside of the organization? If you could maybe share some stories of where things don't go so well and how does that affect the work that you do?
Yeah.
And in places where it does go well, how does that empower you to make better work?
Mm-hmm. I'd start with where it doesn't go so well, because I think being someone that's super passionate about the power of design for businesses and for all types of companies, I think you can wear that on your sleeve. And I've been really guilty of that in the past, where I'm defending my team's work, and there's been cases where I think that's really someone's focused on the fact that you're being defensive in a presentation than the fact that you may have needed to just close your laptop and have a conversation. And I've definitely made that mistake numerous times. And I think when you realize that you're the one that's able to create things in a business, the software engineers are really the others who can write code and build things, that it's really important to bring others into that conversation. And it's not just early, it's just allowing them to ask questions. As soon as you're protective of anything, I think the whole thing unravels. And I've just seen that so many times. I think it takes me back to design school, where it should be built into every program, and it usually is, but critiques are like such a good way of building up thick skin for environments like this, where you can get torn to shreds because you're creating, it's personal. And we talk about that a lot as designers, but I don't think we're honest about it enough, about how important dealing with it is in different situations, where you're really putting everything you feel like on the line. And I think even when I was running my business, sometimes we'd just take the kind of Paul Rand approach where you just present one idea and be like, pay me for it. And that would backfire too. People would had people not pay me, and they still haven't. So if you're listening, I'm going to keep sending that invoice. But no, I think it's just one of those things that I think it's a really building up the ability to have real conversations with people and understand that they don't. And this is what designers talk about a lot, is empathy. But you have to think about it from their point of view. Like when you're talking to certain people, change tact if you need to. If the room changes, if the dynamic changes, don't make the aim of the presentation. There's something I've talked a lot about with my boss at the moment, is let's not make the aim of the meeting to get through the deck that we're presenting. Let's talk about another aim. And if the aim is to win them over or to get feedback, because a lot of the times that these people that you are being defensive around, and I found this a lot too, if you can get past the defensiveness, some of the things they're saying really make a lot of sense. And if you take that on board, it's up to you as well. That's the other thing that people don't say a lot, is I think people always feel like they have to take feedback and do something with it. And teams feel like that's a thing, that's an action item now. But I think just giving them the forum to give feedback and hear them out can often be all you need to do. And that's just really basic behavioral psychology, but it's really true. Like over and over and over again, even those ideas and things that people bring to the table can be really, really useful. And sometimes your purpose as a leader is to help, even again in a different way, reframe what that senior stakeholder has said back to the team in a positive light as something that actually makes a lot of sense, and not that it's this senior stakeholder and that they get the senior stakeholder right to change something because they said so, but because it actually makes sense. And through that, I think you build up enough trust and solid relationships that when you do want to have a really hard debate about something, not even push back, I think that's a strong way of saying it, but just have a good debate, you become an advisor, and that changes the relationship hugely, because then they trust you to advise them and give them counsel versus you're really a service. And I think a lot of those things take time. And my predecessor, Hamesh, was really good at that, because he knew really deeply. He came from a news background and knew really deeply about things, and so could have really good arguments with people about it. And I think we've been able to kind of scale that a lot more and embed people around the business in that way too. That it takes time, and I think patience is another piece of it. But thinking about what you're presenting and what the aim of what you're presenting is and the purpose is actually really, really important. And you shouldn't just kind of rush in because you think everything's sewn up and it's brilliant.
Support for Design Better comes from Uplift Desk, who help you work better and live healthier. Eli and I log a lot of hours at our desks, which can be detrimental to one's health if you're not paying attention to ergonomics. Uplift Desk offer high-quality, well-designed desks, chairs, and accessories to help you build an ergonomic workspace for home or work. Eli recently got a standing desk, and I got a human-scale Freedom chair. I've been dreaming about this chair for a long time, and I finally got one. I've already noticed a big change in my posture with this chair, and my body thanks me for it. Eli is logging a lot more hours standing than sitting these days, and he can make quick transitions with the flip of a switch. We love Uplift Desk, and we know that you will too. Design Better listeners can get a special deal by visiting upliftdesk.com and use the code DesignBetter at checkout for 5% off your order. You'll get free shipping, free returns, and an industry-leading 15-year warranty. Go to upliftdesk.com, use code DesignBetter, and get 5% off. Design a better workspace with Uplift Desk. Support for Design Better comes from Gusto, who make running a small business easy. Get 3 months free at gusto.com/designbetter once you run your first payroll. Running a small business is hard work, especially all of the payroll, quarterly tax filing stuff, and HR things. I'd rather be focused on my business and my customers than dealing with the administrative duties. But Gusto makes it easy. They automated the complicated parts of running a business. With Gusto, I never miss federal or state payroll tax filings. And I love the time off requests and time tracking tools. Gusto even offers a small group health insurance option for nearly any budget. When you run into issues you need help with, their HR experts are ready to help. It's a very well-designed product, easy to use, and great emotional design that will put a smile on your face. Design Better listeners get 3 months free once they run their first payroll. Just go to gusto.com/designbetter. That's gusto.com/designbetter. Support for Design Better comes from Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery. Design Better listeners can save 50% on their order at factormeals.com/designbetter50. Use the code DesignBetter50. You know what happens at my house when things get really busy? In the evenings, we turn to takeout, which can be expensive and it's not very good for our health. Lately, we're making a better choice at crunch time. We turn to Factor for chef-created, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. We like the flexibility of Factor, too. You can change your order up every week with plans from 4 to 18 meals per week, or you can pause or reschedule your deliveries at any time. The meals are so tasty. My wife and I are huge fans, and I like their smoothies, too, which I find are perfect for a quick, healthy breakfast. Factor can help you eat well and feel good while focusing on your career and your family. Head to factormeals.com/designbetter50 and use the code DesignBetter50 to get 50% off your order. That's code DesignBetter50 at factormeals.com/designbetter50 to get half off your order.
So earlier you spoke about not really talking about the value of design, but rather showing the value of design. And so curious about that, but also some of the companies that we've been talking to in our research that are a little higher on the maturity scale, it's not just, usability or customer satisfaction that show the power of design, but it extends to things like revenue and employee efficiency. Could you also talk about some key areas where design has really demonstrated impact to the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah, absolutely. One that's fairly recent is our iPhone app redesign. We started that in, I think, March last year, so 2017. And setting it up was actually quite a process and just getting the right roles and responsibilities and everything outlined because it's such a high profile thing for us. It's really one of our really core touch points with people and for loyal members too. And so we structured in a way that was set up where we had epics, which is pretty standard kind of agile process. But what we hadn't done in the past is build in usability studies, field research, testing, etc. into those epics and give us enough time to iterate on that and keep kind of building it in as we went, knowing that we were going to do a really significant release because it hadn't been changed in such a long time. And so that process in itself connected us really closely with our members and our customers. So that was a big change. And through the power of co-creating with them and our new stakeholders, we're actually doing two things. One, we're able to 100% redesign the user experience for the app, but we're also able to partner with a newsroom to build a new mobile editorial team that was curating content for the iPhone for the first time, which they'd never done before. It was this, whatever was curated for the wsj.com desktop homepage would just be passed down to the app in terms of hierarchy and content sets and curation. So we looked at all of that and we thought about it purely from an iPhone user experience point of view, content and design. And that was a huge change because we were changing workflows as well as, that's big when you've got a large amount of journalists around the world. So the coordination around that effort was huge. And we brought the customers into the process. We're able to do a lot of things that we'd talked a lot about and been chipping away at behind the scenes too, from a design perspective, which was bringing in our newspaper typefaces, which we'd had recut for digital. And that was a brilliant thing to partner with Tobias Ferrer-Jones and Type Network as well on doing that, because one of the first tests that we did when we had visual designs and prototypes, we got feedback from the customers saying, this really feels like the journal. And, I think the hairs on, the back of your neck kind of stopped a little bit. We're like, this is the first time I think we've heard that in some user testing. And I think a lot of the struggles of big news organizations at the moment is around trust with readers and knowing where you are with, all of the different platforms and experiences and aggregators of news content that exist. So that felt like a really good start, and we could kind of build on top of that over time. And then eventually when we released to the public, we'd had so much feedback. There was really only majoritively, good feedback coming in. And the App Store rating and reviews went from 2.3 stars to 4.5. Time spent in the main news feed went from 30 seconds to over 2 minutes. I mean, that was the metric we were trying to hit. Like, we had a objective and key result, and the key result was around time spent, not click-throughs to article from the main news feed. So we factored that up a lot. And so that was huge. We also introduced the ability to save art, like really basic kind of functions that we knew people really wanted, and brought them closer in terms of hierarchy and reduced friction. And so that was really great. And then I think, winning the Webby Award for Best News App was like another kind of reassuring affirmation as well around all of that. And I think that was a really big step in helping the newsroom and the business kind of embrace a lot of what we did and showed value in a slightly different way to pure revenue, because there's obviously revenue when time spent in the app's going up. There's advertising revenue and memberships and things like that attached to it. So that was tangible. The other big one that I think was really interesting was this is not long after I started and took over the role of heading up design, was that our CEO actually kind of gave us a project which was to really look at our subscription flow. And I mean, when you're in a business and you're already a subscriber to the journal, you're probably not looking at it very much, but it was great to hear that I was getting feedback from somewhere and taking that on board. And it was really, really hard to subscribe on a mobile phone. Like, if I gave you that experience now, you probably struggle to do it in like 5 or 6 minutes and maybe not be able to do it at all. So I think that was for us felt like design challenge. This will be a no-brainer. This will be super easy. So we redesigned everything. We removed 50% of the form fields. We made it super mobile friendly with proper validation. If you were typing in an email address, it'd bring up the keyboard with the @ symbol, to like taking a photo of your credit card, and pre-populating content, to looking up Google Maps and making sure that you could get the right address in. But then what we found was, and we were lucky because we had our CEO sponsoring this, we were meeting with him, I think maybe even twice a week at the time. He was like, I want to do this quickly. Let's just do it. And if anyone gets in your way, just bring them in here when you're presenting. And so we ended up having to do that over and over again, because there's things that as we were going through it, it was like, well, we need this form field for this compliance, for addresses. We don't ship to Hawaii, so we can't do that. And we're like, but we're not sending print. And they're like, but you can buy print. And then you name it, like a million edge cases came out of the woodworks. And we had to deal with every single one and try and nip it every single time. And that process really kind of probably took us 3 months. And we launched a new one. And on a mature business, think about the journal at that point, it went from just over kind of 2% conversion to over 22%. So again, that was like proving to the business that we could really remove friction and have a direct impact on revenue, instant impact. So month to month, they could look at the dollars coming in from subscriptions and know that that experience that we'd built for subscribing on a mobile phone to the journal was, a huge improvement. And that was easy in terms of speaking to the business. That was like speaking their language. But it was also, it felt like the start of it was really easy. And then the hard part was like kind of, dealing with all of these crazy edge cases and the people connected to them that, would fight for them dearly because they're, that was their job.
Hey, Che, if you were to estimate how much time and how the quality of the product was impacted by executive sponsorship, what was saved by having executive sponsorship there?
I think doing it at all, to be honest. I don't think
so. It's like it's a 1 or 0. It's just a total binary.
At that time, yeah, I do. I think like it would have been death by 1,000 paper cuts to anyone who tried to do that, even if they could make sense of it. I think they would have always had to go right up to the top. And if you're going to do that every single time someone came out and said, you can't do this for these reasons, and they're all good reasons. I had nothing against the reasons, but there were creative solutions to each one. But you had to work through it. But we needed the support for those people to open the door to even be willing to have a conversation about working through it. And I think just going back to the sheer number of conversations with different people about doing these things and making those changes, yeah, it probably is a 0-1 proposition, honestly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's talk about, that's awesome that you had the executive sponsorship and it worked out and you were able to create value for the business. Not everybody, not all companies have that.
And we don't have that for every project either, might I add.
Sure.
Like I think like that's, that's a rare one-off, and I don't think that's something you want. You don't want to do it. And I think while it worked for that and was great, I think we all learn a lot about it. I think definitely kind of not something you'd want to do every time.
Let's talk about just the bigger picture, because as I was saying, you don't always have the executive, helping you out on things. Because a big part of it, like coming into Wall Street Journal, I don't know what the current culture was as you were coming in. It sounds like you had a predecessor who, where design was really important, and certainly, see that in the brand and so forth. But I know that you've brought in Jake Knapp to bring in the sprint process to the team. And also you personally have advocated quite a bit for design thinking and bringing that in. These are really tools, especially design thinking. John Maeda, when we talked to him, he described this as a bridging technology, thinking of it not as really a design process, but a bridging technology to the rest of the organization to help them, understand design, build those partnerships as we were discussing earlier. Yeah. Can you talk about that? Like, when you came in, was it a transformation? If so, like how does design thinking, design sprints, how does that empower that?
No, I think it's a really good question. I think one of the things that I try to free myself up a lot of the time to work on things like that. So something like bringing Jake Knapp in probably took 9 months to coordinate and again, kind of sponsor and organize. Like what we did, we actually had a 3-day thing where he gave a talk to a select group of 40 people that we kind of opened up through an email that we sent out to the entire company across Dow Jones to participate and put in a reason why you'd want to participate. And So he gave a talk at the start of the day for that. So that was opened up to the entire company. And then the 40 participants got training for a whole day in how to facilitate design sprints. That's been really successful. Unfortunately, I don't have the number off the top of my head with how many we've run since with Jake's methodology, but it's significant. I mean, when you think that it was 0 before, obviously, with Jake's methodology necessarily. So this was it was big. And then he also, for 2 areas of the commercial side of the business and the newsroom, ran 2 short sprints and facilitated them with us for a group of 7 on each side for 2 ideas to kickstart. So that was fantastic. But I think it was also like the ability that like I said before, try to do is free up my kind of time to be able to think about things like that and have the energy to see them through. And you touched on another one. You just talked about John Mader. I was lucky enough to have breakfast with him the other day. We've been trying to connect for a while. He had a really interesting point. I don't know if he mentioned it to you, but the idea of talkers and makers and bridging the gap. And I loved his analogy around that and that why he did his MBA. It's kind of that point of why I've spent so much time listening to people in the newsroom. It's just really learning how to speak their language so you can connect with them on a different level. And I think a lot of design thinking is actually about that. It's really learning about other people's worlds and understanding them really, really deeply so that when you go and create some value or prototype or thing on top of the asset, if it's content in our case, we're creating prototypes on top of it, then you're kind of iterating and improving and then you're in that cycle. But, how do you extract the value from it? And I think you need to go pretty deep before you can figure out how to do that. And you need to reframe and unpack and reframe and unpack. And if you don't kind of understand their world and speak their language, it's quite tricky to do that. And if you're not interested in it, it's also hard. I think you have to be inquisitive, honestly. Like, I'm happy to spend a day in a room talking to pretty much anyone about any topic. I just really enjoy learning. And I think that's a really kind of key skill for designers to have, is to have that inquisitive nature and willingness to learn. And I think that also, back to the earlier point, allows you to deal with critique and things a lot better because you're just genuinely interested in why someone would say that's a bad idea or something they don't like. There's a couple of other things. So like tools and frameworks. So design thinking, design sprints. I think the other really big thing that we've focused on in the last couple of years, and Bonnie on my team, there's actually a good article on the Envision blog about it, but an interview with her is really focusing on what the idea of bringing users in means and how to bring customers and members closer to us when we're building products and get their feedback early and often. And that didn't exist here. So I think they're things that have really they change the conversation a lot. It feels repetitive to say, but let's user test this. Let's do some usability studies. Let's take this out to the real world. Let's send out a survey. But that is just like getting the tools to be able to do that, getting the right people that know how to do it. All of that takes time as well. And if you're structured in a certain way, then you typically look at a headcount in a certain way. And I like to be creative about all of those things. So I think I probably typically would have just kept hiring product designers and people, but we've started to kind of open the team up to different people that want to coach others in human-centered design and design thinking, people that are teachers at schools for design thinking, so that they can actually train other areas of the business on it. And we can start kind of leading that charge and really being, I guess, a strong voice in the business for it, and ensuring that we have the right training programs around it, building that into our onboarding and recruiting and everything else. It takes time, and you need relationships in all of those departments and areas of the business as well.
It's wonderful. So one last question so we can get you out of here on time. And you probably see a lot of content come through in your current role, but are there any books or articles or even authors that have stuck out to you and been helpful in your career?
Can I flip it and say that, and this is a little bit embarrassing to say, but I don't read a lot of books, and it's actually something that I've always personally put a strike against me, that I do to myself, and I do want to do a lot more of it. So I'd kind of flip it right now and say that I think where I find my inspiration at the moment is reaching out to people and connecting with them. And it's been amazing the last 4 years, to be honest, like the people that I've been able to meet in this job, including people like yourselves. It's just the power of actually connecting and saying, hey, if you want to come and see the Wall Street Journal newsroom or meet the team, I've been a big fan of yours, would love to chat. Everyone seems to respond, which has just blown my mind. Like I did a trip out to San Francisco when I was really thinking deeply about how I wanted to organize the team, and was lucky enough to meet with Alex from head of design at Airbnb and people from Facebook and Google and IDEO. Everyone was just so welcoming. I mean, sorry it's not an article or a book, but it's one thing that's actually got me a long way in my career, because just listening to people and the stories they have to tell, particularly designers, the ones that have been really successful in their careers seem to just be incredible storytellers. And I think I've been really lucky to just tap into that sheer by having the 130-year-old brand of the journal behind me and a leadership role here too in design. It's just opened doors like really easily. Been lucky to meet people like John Mader, Michael Beirut, obviously Jake Knapp, and just like so many other folks, and folks from IDEO too. So the things that I've learned through that have just been so inspiring, just to walk away from conversations with people like that, with huge minds that are inquisitive too.
Wonderful. Well, that's a great place to wrap. And Che Douglas, thanks so much for being on the Design Better podcast.